Hi, everyone, and welcome to my show called We Were Lied to About 9/11. I am your host, John Gold, and this show is part of the Soapbox People's Network. This week, we're going to talk about the 28 redacted pages of the Joint Congressional Inquiry, the inquiry itself, Saudi Arabia, the 9/11 Commission, and a multitude of other issues.
Hi, this is John, and I'm here with Senator Bob Graham. Senator, how are you doing today?
Very well. We're driving from north to South Florida, and it's a beautiful day in the Sunshine State.
Excellent. Before we begin, I just want to thank your daughter for the help in getting this interview together. Her help was invaluable. I also want to thank Brian McGlinchey of 28pages.org for getting me her contact information. And I also want to say thank you to you for taking the time today, and that it's an honor to have you on my show.
Well, thank you very much. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Excellent. Okay, I'm going to read your bio for everyone. Senator Bob Graham is the former two-term governor of Florida and served for 18 years in the United States Senate. This combined with 12 years in the Florida legislature for a total of 38 years of public service. As governor and senator, Bob Graham was a centrist committed to bringing his colleagues together behind programs that serve the broadest public interest. He was recognized by the people of Florida when he received an 83% approval ranking as he concluded 8 years as governor. Bob Graham retired from public service in January 2005 following his presidential campaign in 2003. He has written 4 books, including a nonfiction book, Intelligence Matters, a novel, Keys to the Kingdom, drawing on his experiences as chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee, and America the Owner's Manual, a guide to effective citizenship, written while he was a senior fellow at the Harvard Kennedy School of Government. Since leaving the Senate in 2005, Graham has been chair of the Congressional Commission on the Prevention of Weapons of Mass Destruction, a member of the Congressional Financial Crisis Inquiry Commission, and co-chair of the Presidential Commission on the BP Deepwater Horizon oil spill. A Phi Beta Kappa graduate of the University of Florida and the Harvard Law School, he established the Center for Public Service at the University of Florida to enhance civic engagement and prepare the next generation of public and civic leaders. Graham and the former Adele Khoury have been married for 55 years. Congratulations. They have 4 daughters, and the oldest of which, Gwen Graham, was elected to the U.S. Congress in 2014. Senator Graham has 11 grandchildren. Congratulations on that as well. And on that subject, I'd just like to say I recently became an uncle to my little niece Maya, who was born on March 11th. So welcome to the world, Maya. Thank you very much. Okay, so I'm going to get into the questions. What was the day of 9/11 like for you?
With Porter Goss and Senator John Kyle, I had just returned from a trip visiting a number of places identified by the CIA as being hotspots for terrorism. The last of those was Pakistan, where we were hosted by the Pakistani Central Intelligence, which is referred to as ISI. The head of the ISI was a General Ahmed. He was particularly gracious. We extended an invitation to him to reciprocate should he be in Washington. It turned out that he was in Washington on September the 11th, 2001. We were having breakfast in Porter Goss, who was the chair of the House Intelligence Committee's office, talking about motivations behind Al-Qaeda when we got the first notification of an airplane hitting one of the World Trade Centers. A few minutes later, a second airplane hitting the other World Trade Center tower. At that point, we knew that it wasn't just coincidental accidents. And for the first time in many decades, the U.S. Capitol was cleared, and we all sought refuge while the rest of September the 11th was playing out.
That's very interesting, and it's a little funny to me because I've kind of known your story for several years now on the day of 9/11, but it's very interesting to hear it from your perspective. What was the first thing that you questioned about the attacks?
Well, I guess the first question was what we were talking about when the attacks were occurring, which was what is it that motivates Al-Qaeda to the level and violence of its activities. General Ahmed, who had a long experience with Al-Qaeda and the Taliban, said that most people live in three phases of life. They have memories of the past, dreams of the future, but their primary concentration is on what's happening today. In the case of Al-Qaeda, the past and the present are irrelevant. The only thing that counts is the future, and therefore they are unhinged from the kinds of mores, cultural considerations that operate for most human beings. September the 11th was a tragic example of that philosophy.
Right. I have a quote from an article entitled, quote, "Further Delay in U.S. Congressional Investigation into September 11th Attacks," end quote, from WSWS.org, and it's dated March 6, 2002. And the quote is, "Graham and Goss rebuffed calls for an inquiry in the weeks immediately following September 11th, siding with White House suggestions that congressional hearings into the greatest security failure in U.S. history would detract from the efforts to prevent future terrorist attacks and conduct a war in Afghanistan," end quote. Is this true? Because I could not find any references to substantiate that claim.
Yes. We did not want to take any actions with our inquiry that would have increased the vulnerability of the United States to a second or third attack. The White House requested, therefore, that we defer the initiation of our inquiry until they felt that the potential of a further attack had passed. We agreed to that and used that period in the fall of 2001 to prepare for the inquiry, which would begin early in 2002.
Now, from what I understand, both Bush and Cheney asked Tom Daschle not to investigate the attacks at all. So you're saying that in early 2002, when you started, when did the congressional inquiry start? I'm sorry.
I believe our first hearings were held in February of 2002.
Okay. So you're saying that in February 2002, the White House gave the go-ahead?
No, we weren't under the direction of the White House, but the White House had made a request that in light of the potential of further attacks and that the people who were involved in trying to ferret that possibility out and respond if in fact it occurred were some of the same people that we would want to involve in our inquiry, and they felt that there could be a conflict of having the inquiry going on during that immediate post-9/11 period. We felt that was a reasonable request. We also recognized that we were going to need some time to put together our staff, begin securing documents, identifying future witnesses, and that the inquiry would not be adversely affected by delaying until 2002.
Okay. I have always found it odd, and several other people have always found it odd, that the administration did not want the Congress to investigate the attacks. If anybody...
The issue of the White House asking Tom Daschle not to initiate the inquiry, I am not aware that that in fact occurred, but I can say that Tom Daschle and the other congressional leaders were very supportive of our inquiry and gave us full assistance throughout.
Okay, just so everybody knows, there's a video of Tom Daschle saying as such on my YouTube channel, which is Gold9472. Okay, the next question. Obviously, you are familiar with the story about Randy Glass. I've heard you talk about it before, giving your office a warning in the months prior to 9/11. Could you please tell us about this?
Frankly, I am not aware. As of March 2015, about the Randy Glass issue. If it had been brought to my attention at the time, apparently it wasn't considered to be a significant part of our inquiry responsibility.
Okay. It's one of those things that people have always questioned, and so I wanted to get your point of view on the subject. Okay. Now, could you tell us what the 28 redacted pages of the Joint Congressional Inquiry are?
No, because they are classified, and therefore we are limited in discussion. And what's been publicly said, and I would concur, that chapter refers primarily to the issue of who financed 9/11, and it points a very strong finger of suspicion at Saudi Arabia.
Okay, I'm sorry. I didn't mean for you to tell us what's in it. I just wanted you to tell everybody what they are. Just so everybody knows, the Joint Congressional Inquiry report was released with 28 redacted pages, and as Senator Graham has just pointed out, some of the information within those pages talks about Saudi support, Saudi government support, I guess, for the hijackers, and it also...
I might say that issue goes to one of the remaining areas of lack of consensus, and that is, did the 19 hijackers operate alone, or did they have support from some external source? The official position of the United States executive, including the intelligence community and the FBI, the White House, is that they acted alone. It is the position of the leadership of both the Congressional Inquiry and the 9/11 Citizens Commission that it was highly implausible that the 19 hijackers, given their lack of linguistic familiarity and the fact that most of them had never been to the United States before they came for the purpose of 9/11, that they could have carried out such a complex plot over a long period of time, maintaining their anonymity, being able to practice to the point that they carried out the plot with such devastating effect.
From what I've heard, there are more than one country, or there is more than one country listed within the 28 redacted pages. Can you at least confirm that much, or
no?
Okay. My next question, and I have heard you say that the claims regarding then head of the Pakistani ISI, Lieutenant General Mahmoud Ahmed, ordering Ahmed Omar Saeed Sheikh to wire transfer $100,000 to Muhammad Atta are unsubstantiated. Many people...
I can say that our inquiry did not reach that conclusion.
Okay, so you're saying that your inquiry looked into those allegations, or no?
They were part of our general inquiry. I'm not saying that we conclusively said that it didn't happen, but we did say we could not, based on the information that we were able to develop, state that Ahmed had been involved in some relationship with the Taliban and Al Qaeda of the nature.
Many people were hoping that this would be referenced in the 28 redacted pages, and it sounds, based on what you said, that it's not. And as someone who has looked into this issue a lot, I can say that it seems like, based on all of the available information that's out there, the likelihood that it did happen, it seems more likely that it did happen than didn't. I can't prove it, unfortunately, but it's one of those things that has been neglected. I have never heard anyone in government explain why these allegations are incorrect. And the 9/11 report did not address them, but there was a document found from the 9/11 Commission that said something to the effect that the Pakistani ISI did not send money to Muhammad Atta. But before that sentence and after that sentence, there are many redactions, and their names are not even mentioned. So it's just one of those things. I know the families were very interested in that, and so forth. During the joint congressional inquiry, there was a leak about NSA intercepts. Can you tell us about this incident?
I'm not certain what intercepts are being referenced.
I think the intercepts were tomorrow is 0 hour and the match begins tomorrow. They were supposedly intercepted, I think, a day or two before 9/11 and weren't intercepted until a day or two, or translated until a day or two after 9/11.
The NSA collects, no doubt, thousands of intercepts daily, and there was some evidence that the traffic increased in the days immediately before 9/11. But collecting an intercept that refers to some undefined event that may occur in the near future is not by any means conclusive evidence. Our goal, frankly, was to stay on the core issues, and there were lots of interesting, intriguing subplots, but we tried to avoid following those to the detriment of our ability to answer the basic questions.
Right. Well, there was an incident where there was a leak. I believe it is in June of 2002, and I believe that it was found that it was Richard Shelby that actually leaked this. And I thought I read a quote from you from 2007 saying that it was an attempt by Dick Cheney and the White House to undermine the inquiry, to, I think maybe you said to shut it down or try and shut it down, or something to that effect.
When you said that it was, what is the it in that sentence?
the leak. There was a leak in June of 2002 from the Joint Congressional Inquiry of 2 NSA intercepts, and it was found.
Yeah, there was no question. Vice President Cheney was closely monitoring what we were doing, and was not happy that we were having the inquiry at all. And he did at one point over an issue similar to the one you have just discussed. I'm not certain if it was precisely that, indicate that his disapproval of what was going on, and that if that continued, that the administration might stop its assistance to the inquiry. We did not change our actions or our plan of inquiry. The administration, frankly, was off and on in terms of its level of support. There were some areas where it was forthcoming. There were other areas where it was very closed. And the fact that the 28 pages were censored is an example of that non-cooperation.
Another example would be the FBI trying to prevent or preventing Abdul Sattar Sheikh from testifying before the Joint Congressional Inquiry.
Yes, that was
correct?
The man who in San Diego who had at the one and the same time been a paid agent of the FBI with the mission of monitoring particularly Saudi students in the Southern California area to determine if any of them were engaged in any plots that might lead to future terrorism. While he had that assignment, he also opened his home to tenants, primarily young Saudi males, and 2 of his tenants ended up being 2 of the hijackers. So you had the anomalous situation of a paid FBI agent being the landlord of 2 of the future hijackers. We very much wanted to talk to that man. We thought he had a peculiar access to the hijackers and some information on the actions of the FBI, but the FBI went to great lengths, including refusing to serve a subpoena, which it alone could serve, because at that point the man was in protective custody, and they were the only entity who knew of where he was and could provide access to him. That was a low point of our inquiry.
Right. Why do you think the Bush and Obama administrations would have an interest in protecting elements within Saudi Arabia?
That is another of the unanswered questions of 9/11. Why has the United States government gone to such lengths to cover up the involvement of Saudi Arabia? You can speculate that it may have to do with the special relationship that has existed between the United States and Saudi Arabia since World War II, which Saudi Arabia has committed to provide us a reliable source of petroleum, and we have committed to provide them a defense umbrella. It may have to do with the volatile situation in the Middle East, in which Saudi Arabia at least has presented itself as being a reliable U.S. ally. In the Bush administration, it may have had ties to the long relationship between the House of Saud and the Bush family. which or what other rationale there may have been for the cover-up, it has, in my opinion, denied the American people the full truth of one of the most horrific events in modern American history, has denied justice to the families who suffered grievous losses during 9/11, and has adversely affected our national security by giving to Saudi Arabia the not unreasonable conclusion that Saudi Arabia is immune from any sanction for its actions, and therefore can continue to do the things that it has been doing, which are continuing to support Al-Qaeda and to be a significant factor in the formation and resources made available to ISIS.
Well, from what I've read, and I think I've read an article from you that actually mentioned that Bandar is mentioned within the 28 redacted pages. There's an allegation that the wife of Prince Bandar gave money to two of the hijackers. As we all know, the Bush family has very close ties to Prince Bandar. That could be a reason.
That's not a 28-page issue. That has been made public. What transpired is there was a Saudi agent who had been assigned to Southern California. His name was Bayoumi. His job was to monitor Saudi students to assure that they were not plotting some activities adverse to the interest of the royal family. When two of the hijackers came to San Diego at Bayoumi's request, Bayoumi's income suddenly went up. And one of the sources of that increase in his income were payments that were being made from a charity administered by the wife of the Saudi ambassador to the United States, Prince Bandar, allegedly for assistance to Saudis who had a medical problem or for some other reason were in distress and needed assistance. Money that supposedly was going for that purpose suddenly ended up in the bank account of Bayoumi's wife, with the implication that Bayoumi and his wife had become the conduit for funds to those two hijackers while they were living in San Diego.
So you're saying that the Bandar issue is not within the 28 redacted pages?
I can't say I can just say that the instance that you cited relative to Bandar's wife and payments that ended up under the control of Bayoumi's wife, that is a known set of facts. In fact, it's included in my book, Intelligence Matters.
Right, I remember. Now, isn't it true that a lot of people in this country benefit from Saudi Arabian money?
Well,
like, for instance, there was a recent sale of $63 billion worth of weapons to Saudi Arabia. And the Bush family is an example.
Yeah. All right. I mean, the answer to your question is Saudi Arabia is a very wealthy country and has many dealings with the United States government. Under that commitment that we made back during the presidency of Franklin Roosevelt, we made commitments to provide them with security against external attacks. So that's not a new departure. The situation that I refer to relates specifically to support for two of the 19 hijackers, which came through a charity administered by Mrs. Bandar to Mrs. Bayoumi, and then with the inference that she was a pass-through to get the money to the two hijackers.
Okay, this is a general question. In my opinion, covering up for anyone involved in the murder of 2,976 people is a crime, and people should be held accountable for it. Do you agree with that assessment?
Well, I happen to be a lawyer, but a non-practicing lawyer. I would suggest you might ask that question of the current or incoming Attorney General. That would be at that level that a decision as to the criminal culpability of people who have covered up, whether they are criminally responsible or not, I'll leave to others. But I will state, based on what I know, that they have disserved the United States by denying us, the American people, the ability to understand and therefore fully participate in decisions evolving out of 9/11. They have denied the families of those almost 3,000 Americans who were killed on September the 11th the ability to receive any compensation from co-conspirators. And the American national security has been weakened by the failure to let the American people and the world know what Saudi Arabia did around 9/11 and subsequent to 9/11.
Well, one of the reasons that people are fighting for the release of the 28 redacted pages is so that the families can use them in a court of law. Now, one of the problems with that, and I'm going to get into that, there's a problem with that, and I'm going to get into that after the next question. What is your opinion on how individuals like FBI agent Robert Wright was blocked from doing investigations into Saudi Arabia prior to 9/11? And this seems to have been a theme within the different alphabet agencies.
Yeah, the attention recently has been on the 28 pages. They are very dramatic, tangible, and now some 13 years in which they have been withheld is a particularly egregious act. But the 28 pages are by no means the totality of instances in which Saudi Arabia has been covered up by U.S. officials, and the situation that you cite, I will have to say I'm not intimately familiar with that, but that would be another example of the U.S. deference to Saudi Arabia to the disadvantage of the American people.
Well, just so everyone knows, FBI agent Robert Wright started an investigation in the 90s, and he called it vulgar betrayal. And he investigated people like Yassin Al-Qadi, who says that he is a friend of Dick Cheney's, but whatever. Anyway, he was blocked and shut down from doing his job. And that happened a lot throughout the 90s. Like George Tenet was very good friends with Prince Bandar. And George Tenet would have meetings with Prince Bandar that his subordinates weren't aware of. They didn't know what they talked about. And in fact, they were told to kind of back off of the Saudis with regards to investigating terrorism and so on and so forth. So there was a common theme. It happened prior to 9/11, and it also happened after 9/11. This covering up for Saudi Arabia. Now,
if I could just give another instance, which is
sure.
as fairly recently. three of the hijackers did their basic flight training near Sarasota, Florida. There were allegations by, among others, the people in the neighborhood and people who were involved in the security for this community, that those three hijackers, including Bata, incidentally, had a continuing and close relationship with a prominent Saudi family living in the Sarasota community. A few days before 9/11, the Saudi family left their Sarasota home in what was referred to as urgent conditions, i.e. new car in the front parking lot, food on the table, clothes in the washer, and returned to Saudi Arabia. Again, the inference is that someone tipped them off as to what was about to happen. The FBI has gone to extreme lengths to conceal what they should have learned about the relationship between the hijackers and the prominent family. The FBI initially said they had no information about that case. During a Freedom of Information Act hearing before a federal judge, they finally, months later, admitted that they had over 80,000 pages of materials relating to the Sarasota investigation, which the judge demanded be brought to his office, and for the last several months, he has been reviewing those pages to make a determination as to which deserve to be released to the American people.
Now, just so everybody knows, the Florida Bulldog, I believe, is the one that's leading the charge for this FOIA request, correct?
A very outstanding investigative journalist, Dan Christensen, he wrote the first story around the time of the 10th anniversary of 9/11 and has been dogged, no pun intended, in his efforts since that time.
Right. That's a very important story. I highly recommend that people go to the Florida Bulldog, which was previously known as the Broward Bulldog, and go read the stories of Dan Christensen about this issue. Now, it has been reported that when Bush came into office, one of the first things he did was to tell the different alphabet agencies to, quote, back off the Saudis and the bin Ladens. That under the Bill Clinton administration, it was, quote, slow go, but under Bush, it was, quote, no go. In your opinion, do you think this could have contributed to the success of the 9/11 attacks?
Well, if that's true, and if that directive resulted in less than aggressive pursuit of the many leads that, had they been followed, would have resulted in blowing up the plot before the plot blew up America, it would be a very serious charge.
Well, I remember that FBI agent John O'Neill was complaining a lot about the obstructionism. He called it the Saudi obstructionism under the Bush administration, and unfortunately he resigned from the FBI, went to work as security for the World Trade Center, and died on 9/11.
There's no question that the Bush administration covered up for the Saudis. Whether the president himself or someone on his behalf told the alphabet intelligence community agencies that they should go wax on the Saudis, I don't know. But their actions were certainly consistent with such a directive.
Okay, now we spoke about how the families want the 28 redacted pages released so they can use them in a court of law. The next question is going to be information intensive, so let me just read the question. The 9/11 Commission essentially absolved the government of Saudi Arabia and individuals like Princess Haifa with regards to the 9/11 attacks. They said they looked into the allegations of the 28 redacted pages and found that they were lacking. What is your opinion of this?
Well, that's a question that you should be asking of someone who was a part of the Citizens 9/11 Commission. Their wording of that statement about the Saudis was a very artful parsing of phrases, and then apparently in a footnote, the 9/11 Commission somewhat reversed itself and said nothing else that's said elsewhere should be interpreted as giving Saudi Arabia absolution from responsibility for.
Well, okay.
So that has somewhat muddied the issue, and my position has been let's let the 28 pages be released, and then we will have a real debate about whether the evidence that supports what is in those 28 pages is conclusive. The interesting thing to me is our final report was well over 800 pages, so the 28 pages were just a relatively small part of the whole, and there have been, to my knowledge, no questions raised that the balance of the report that has been made public was less than a full, impartial, professional investigation and well-formed conclusions. So why would the 28 pages, I don't think the 8 pages were withheld because somebody thought that they were not fully substantiated. I think they were withheld because somebody then and now doesn't want those facts to be made broadly available.
Okay, now what I'm going to do, and the reason that it's problems is because the Saudis are pointing to the 9/11 Commission in defense of what's supposedly in the 28 redacted pages. Now, there is a sentence within the 9/11 report that does absolve the government of Saudi Arabia, and there was also a monograph that was released on terrorist financing, and there's a quote in that monograph, and it says, quote, "Despite persistent public speculation, there is no evidence that the hijackers who initially settled in San Diego, Nidar and Hazmi, received funding from Saudi citizens Omar al-Bayoumi and Osama Baznan, or that Saudi Princess Haifa al-Faisal provided funds to the hijackers either directly or indirectly," end quote. Now, do you have a response to that, or?
Well, we found to the contrary. We found that there was the passage of funds that were allegedly for charitable purposes to Mrs. Bayoumi without any pretense of it being for a charitable purpose, but heavy inference that it was, given the timing of the sudden increase in Mrs. Bayoumi's monthly income, that it was not for her purposes, that it was to assist the hijackers. There also was the case of Mr. Bayoumi, who was an employee of a Saudi company in a position that was referred to as a ghost, i.e. he was on the payroll, but he never showed up for work. And in the same month that the two hijackers came to San Diego, Bayoumi's allowances that he received as part of his compensation increased by approximately 8 times, again raising the inference that he was a conduit of these additional funds to support the hijackers in San Diego.
Well, let me explain. Are you familiar with the author Phil Sheenan?
Yes, I know. I know of.
Okay. He wrote a book, and in that book, he said that Philip Zelikow, who was the executive director of the 9/11 Commission, who essentially had more sway than any of the 9/11 commissioners, as far as to who would be questioned, what questions would be asked, and so on and so forth, he blocked half of the Saudi investigator requests during the time of the 9/11 Commission. He fired Dina Lieseman, who worked on the Joint Congressional Inquiry and helped to author the 28 redacted pages, when she tried to go through a back channel to gain access to those 28 redacted pages, because Philip Zelikow was making it difficult for her to get to them. Late in the 9/11 Commission, Philip Zelikow and Dieter Snell took part in a, quote, late-night editing session to remove Saudi support for the hijackers from the 9/11 report and relegated them to footnotes in the back of the book against the wishes of the staffers who worked on this. Do you have anything to say about that?
I have read that. Mr. Gold, I'm trying to respond to questions from what I know and indicate when I am just a reader of what third parties have said. What I know is written in the book Intelligence Matters and in the novel Keys to the Kingdom. I have no inside knowledge of what happened in the Citizens 9/11 Commission, and have a high regard for the members of that commission. If we just apparently came to a significantly different conclusion as to the financial support that Saudi Arabia provided before and immediately during the 9/11 tragedy.
Okay. Many people believe that the likes of Philip Zelikow and Dieter Snell should be held accountable for things that they did during the time of the 9/11 Commission. So that's why I brought that up. There was a family member who wanted me to ask you this question. Are there any valid reasons anymore, like protecting sources and methods, to keep the 28 redacted pages redacted?
No, and there were no valid reasons at the time they were initially redacted. Both Senator Richard Shelby, Republican of Alabama, and myself, Democrat from Florida, who had been directly involved in the preparation of the 28 pages, said publicly at the time that we did not believe there was any reason that those pages should have been withheld. And what was true in the summer of 2003, when it was announced that they were going to be withheld, continues to be true in the spring of 2015.
Well, then they should be released as far as I'm concerned. And just so you know, with regards to the 9/11 Commission, the National Archives has only released about 35% of the documents from the 9/11 Commission, and a lot of the documents that they have released are greatly redacted. So we're still fighting for that information as well.
That surprises me, because I have been told, and I have not independently confirmed this, that the 9/11 Commission, the Citizens Commission, that its materials have all gone to the archives, have been digitized, and are available on the internet. This is the first time I had heard that that was not the case.
No, that's not the case. And as a matter of fact, Prince Bandar, there's something called a memoranda for the record, and it's basically a description of the interviews that took place for different witnesses during the time of the 9/11 Commission. Prince Bandar's memoranda for the record is still classified, and there are many instances like that. Now, my feelings have always been that individual.
Let me, now that you phrased it the way you did, I'm not surprised that there are parts of the 9/11 Commission which are in the National Archives that have continued to be classified. But I believe the totality of what they accumulated is in the National Archives, some of which is classified. The rest is available to the public. The report of the congressional inquiry has not been delivered to the National Archives and is being held by the Senate as the custodian of those documents.
Well, okay. From what I understand, several of the documents have yet to be released. I can't name what those specific documents are, but I know that there are some that still need to be released. Now, one thing I forgot to mention, when Bush and Cheney testified before the 9/11 Commission, not under oath, with no transcripts and all that stuff, according to John Lehman, he said that during their meeting with Bush and Cheney, he asked George Bush specifically about the allegations of Princess Haifa, and Bush, quote, dodged the questions. Do you have anything to say about that?
No, I feel pretty confident and obligated to say what I know the truth to be, and indicate when I think I know what the truth is, but I'm not going to get involved in commenting on matters of which I have no personal knowledge.
Okay. My last question, actually there are two more questions. My feelings have always been that individuals responsible for 9/11 need to be held accountable. Not everyone that believes in a certain ideology, religion, or everyone from a particular country. There's actually a term for doing that, and it's called collective punishment. And it's a war crime, and it's against the Geneva Conventions. Do you agree with that assessment? Or do you think that the U.S. should do something like go to war with Saudi Arabia?
No, I don't think we should go to war with Saudi Arabia, but I think we should demand some appropriate recognition by Saudi Arabia of what in fact it did, and compensation to Americans who suffered as a result of the Saudi action. There's some interesting parallels here. The Lockerbie case of, I guess, the late 1980s, where Libya was alleged to have been involved in the bombing that resulted in the murder of the passengers and crew on that Pan Am flight. Eventually, after denying responsibility, finally accepted it and made compensation. Going all the way back to the Civil War, the British, who had indicated they were going to be neutral, but in fact, assisted the Confederacy in building naval ships after the war at the insistence of the U.S. government, accepted responsibility and again paid compensation. So there are precedents when a foreign government is a co-conspirator in actions against the United States and its people. Saudi Arabia should similarly be challenged to accept its responsibility and compensate.
I do agree wholeheartedly with what you said. I also believe that the United States needs to take responsibility for their actions over the years as far as enabling and or collaborating with the Saudis. Is there anything...
That's, again, I mean, I think the place where that responsibility should lie is with the American people in the political process. If they believe that there were individuals who acted disingenuously to the detriment of the American people, they should be punished politically. Now, because this has gone on so long, many of the people who the American people had full information might have been the subjects of that punishment, have left the scene and no longer are susceptible to things like being voted out of office or being impeached or other sanctions that would be available. That's just another part of the lack of justice that has come from this cover-up of Saudi involvement.
Right, I agree. And you know, unfortunately, with regards to 9/11, there are a number of different cover-ups, and there's been a great lack of accountability in government. And as we've learned over the last 14 years, a government that is not accountable is a very dangerous government.
And that's what our wise forefathers recognized from their experience with King George III, and therefore our government was set up with checks and balances so that ideally no one individual or branch of government could become oppressive. We've seen some breakdowns in that system in the case of 9/11 and specifically the U.S. Saudi involvement in 9/11.
Is there anything that you would like to promote at this time, like JASTA and so forth?
Yes. The families of the victims of 9/11 have been attempting for several years to seek justice in the federal courts through litigation, which would essentially name the Saudi government and various Saudi entities as being co-conspirators. They have been dismissed under this doctrine of sovereign immunity that says you cannot sue the head of another state. The federal courts have now reinterpreted that doctrine in the context of 9/11 and have said that it is inapplicable, or at least does not represent the blanket shield that it has been thus far. So the litigants are back at it. Their case would be more easily heard and disposed of if the Congress were to bring greater clarity to the rules relating to citizen suits against foreign governments alleged of involvement in terrorism. The U.S. Senate passed such a bill at the end of the last session. I believe they passed it unanimously, but it was not taken up in the House, so the whole process is now starting again in this Congress, and I hope that before the end of 2016 that the Congress will have found this to be an area in which there could be bipartisan agreement. Let's make it fair and equitable for Americans who have been injured by the complicity of foreign governments in terrorist action to get some recompense for their grievous losses.
Also, H.R. Res 14 now, it's called. We need to promote that, which is, could you explain that to us?
Is that the resolution asking the President to release the 28 pages?
Correct.
Yes. Several members of the House, I think now it's up to 20 or 30, have come together in a bipartisan spirit behind a resolution to request the President to release the 28 pages. I'm hopeful that that resolution will pass and pass expeditiously. Again, I see no reason why this shouldn't be the basis of strong bipartisan agreement, and bring this thing directly before the President, who is the person who can make the decision to let the American people see what their government and other governments did during the period before 9/11 and what has transpired since then in the effort to keep that information away from the American people.
Right. The H.R. Res 14...
Say, if I could, to your audience, that they could directly participate in this by writing a letter or sending an email or placing a call to their congressmen and senators in support of the congressional expression of its opinion that the President should release this information to the public.
Well, he told two family members, Kristen Brotweiser and Bill Doyle, that he would release these pages, and they haven't heard from him. So, hopefully, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say there are a number of arrows pointed at this target of release. This congressional action is one. The President has asked the head of the intelligence community, General Clapper, to do a review of the 28 pages and recommend whether he thinks they should be released. There's a separate administrative process underway as it relates to the materials coming out of the Sarasota case. So there are a number of initiatives which have the potential of breaking this logjam and allowing the American people to better understand what happened and what their government has done in their name.
Absolutely. I would just like to promote 28pages.org, which has a number of helpful tools to send letters to your representatives with regards to HRES 14 and so forth. Senator Graham, I want to thank you very much for your time today. It's been a privilege to talk with you.
Well, Mr. Gold, we've not had the opportunity to meet, but I know you have a reputation of being a very serious scholar and student of 9/11 events, and particularly this issue of government cover-up. And the questions that you've asked today indicate that reputation is well-deserved. So I appreciate the chance to have participated in this discussion with you.
Well, thank you very much, sir, and I hope you have a pleasant rest of the day in Florida and enjoy all those grandchildren that you got.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I will.
All right, sir. Have a good day.
Okay. Goodbye. Same to you.
Bye-bye.